I think was your fourth
Fourth
solo show, and the guy I was standing next to leaned over to me and said, "He looks like David Bowie, but more handsome." And that's my introduction for Ed O'Brien.
Wow.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
There's lots to talk about. The solo record is coming in April. It is called Earth. Let's talk about these shows, though. Like we said, you have done four. It was Toronto, New York, Chicago, and last night in L.A. How'd they go? How'd it feel?
Varying degrees of nervousness. The first night, Toronto, I mean, I've never done it. I'd never been a frontman. As I said, it's like, it might be only 4 or 5 yards to the stage right to center, but it's more like 400 or 500.
Yeah.
So what I've wanted to do is be present and enjoy it, because I'm completely out my comfort zone, but this is the place that I want to be. So I haven't had the luxury of having, a year of doing small gigs. I've got the luxury of coming out of a band like Radiohead and being able to do this, and so there are certain people who'd be interested, but it also means I'm immediately kind of in the spotlight.
Absolutely.
So, it's give and take, but I'm really happy to be doing this.
Was the live show one of the things that kind of kept you up at night when you thought about doing a solo album?
Yeah, it was. Well, it's all stages. So the first thing you do is you have to get through making a record and singing that. So you have that stage. So, and then once that's finished, it's like you start talking about how you're gonna, and you want to play live. And then that literally was, like I said in Toronto last week, I said, I've been nervous since Christmas.
Yeah.
And it wasn't Christmas 2019, it was Christmas 2018. So,
you have lived with these songs, obviously, for a while, making them over the course of many, many years. Now that you have gone out and played them in front of people, have you learned new things about them? Have people reacted to different parts, or have you kind of experienced them in new ways now that you're playing them in front of people?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I made the record, I was I wanted to make a record that was a bit like a mixtape. It had different flavors on it, because I like albums that, if you were weaned on the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's or whatever as a kid, that's it. So that's kind of the template that is set. So I've always liked that. The interesting thing, or the harder thing coming out playing live, is that you've got all these quite different songs and how you put them together.
Yep.
So the other thing that we're trying to do is we're really taking a leaf out of, I've been really influenced by the band Fish.
Okay.
And the way that there's an amazing podcast called Long May They Run, and they talk about their philosophy for music and what they do. And they jam on these songs.
Yeah.
And they change every night, and they go out there and they play them. And sometimes, they go like, well, we'll be in 8 minutes into jam and nothing's happening. It sounds awful. And nothing might happen, but then you get a moment of, of transcendental beauty.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm aiming. That's what I'd like to be able to do, is to get to that point. So a lot of the songs will have endings that we've started to jam, and we did last night.
Yeah.
But that's the pace that I want to get kind of like, in a groove and in a rhythm.
That's fun. It seems so hard for a brand new band. If you've been in Fish, who have been a band forever, or if you've done Radiohead forever, it feels like there is more of obviously a familiarity and kind of an unspoken musicianship between you guys. Your band, though everyone seemed to fit very well, it's still brand new, so to be able to read each other to the point where you can jam.
It's early days, and you're right. It's exactly that. It takes. And I think what's great is that we've got this touring ahead of us.
Yeah.
So we're going to have all year, and we'll be a very different band in a year's time.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions a little later on about kind of what's going on. Some at this point have been announced, some have not. But let's talk about the record first.
Thank you.
It is called Earth. Kind of wanted to start with Brazil.
Yeah.
And there's a song called Brazil, but actually your time in Brazil was a big inspiration for this record.
Yeah. What was it? It's now 7 years ago. 7 years ago, me and my family, my wife and my 2 young children, went to live out in Brazil, and we'd had a great love of. We traveled a lot in Brazil. We love Brazilian music, and we love the culture of it. And we just finished a tour with Radiohead, and I sort of 5 years back when Radiohead released In Rainbows, I said to the guys, I said, listen, in 2012. I want to take time out with my family for a year, and we're going to go to South America and we're going to live there. We ended up going specifically to Brazil and living there on this farm in the middle of this extraordinary, beautiful Brazilian countryside.
Yeah.
And it was the most, there was no mobile phone signal, there was no Wi-Fi. We were really, the kids went to the little village school, lovely, lovely people around us. And it was really a chance to, life was very simple, but life was incredibly rich. There weren't the big shops around. There was literally, for me, it was music, family, and eating. And that was it. And it was whilst I was out there that I had, for probably the first time in a long time, because I've been a very sort of hands-on father, I had time when the kids were at school, and was to start writing.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. We went to Carnival, got inspired by Carnival in Rio, and I sort of, for me, the writing process is a bit like I had to get a feeling, or I had to feel what I wanted to do. I mean, there's no point me making music that for the sake of it. You have to have something to say, and you have to have a feeling of what you want to do. And it was in Brazil, and going to Carnival and experiencing that, and it's just like, it's the greatest show on earth. And it's like, I want something about the rhythm and the hypnotic nature of the beat and the polyrhythms and the melodies. I want to, whatever I do, I want it to incorporate some of this.
With many of the artists that I've talked to, and I'm not a songwriter, so I don't know this, but they describe the songwriting process as kind of the song finding them. You don't sit down and you're like, I'm going to write a song today. You can do that, but kind of the most natural and kind of the most productive and maybe the most quality that comes out is when you're kind of doing what you're doing and the song kind of comes through you. Is that what you were experiencing?
Totally. And for years I'd sort of struggled, because I struggled songwriting in terms of like, I'm going to write with this kind of almost egotistical thing, and it's you have to let go. And it is, and it for me it's a bit like, I feel like these songs are already written, and it's my job, and it's like you're just trying to tune in on the frequency where it comes through, and you know when it's right. And it's much more of an intuitive and emotional response rather than a mind thing. And that for me is that for me is totally compelling.
Absolutely.
Because it's a great, you've got an idea, but it's a great, there's so much mystery to it and magic, and it comes through, and it's like, and you come out of your shed and you, like 5 hours later, you go, I have no idea how I've got to this point, but what I'm hearing, I really like.
It's great, yeah. As much as you're creating a song, you're almost being introduced to a song.
You're like, people talk about, they always talk about it, the greats, you're just a conduit for this stuff, and your job as a songwriter is to get yourself in a situation where it flows through.
Yeah, it's pretty special when you think about it.
Yeah.
The writing process then, or a big deal of the inspiration came in Brazil. Was any of the album recorded in Brazil?
No.
Where did the recording happen?
So a lot of the recordings happened in, basically two places. Wales, where we started. So the other country that played a big part was when we came back from Brazil, I started heading off to Wales, to the mountains there, and I found it a really inspiring place to write in the country, and the music sort of flowed through. So I wanted to start the record there, so we started the record there. With my incredible band and that I had for 3 weeks, and my production team. So we started there, and then we sort of did the nuts and bolts, the sort of the hard slog took place in the studio in London.
Okay, gotcha. As far as kind of an overarching theme for these 9 songs, is there something that ties them all together? It seems like nature was a big part.
Nature's a big part, but I think when I sort of was in the heart of inspiration and finding that place, there were two things that I was really influenced by. Carl Sagan. Wow. He wrote. There's this photo of the Earth, and it was taken by Voyager spacecraft, and it's the furthest most photo taken of the Earth. And it's this little pale blue dot, and there's this arrow, and it's called the Pale Blue Dot.
And that was originally going to be the album title.
Yeah, and that was the working title for the album. And I read it, and I implore anybody, who's watching this or listening to this, if you're interested, Google Carl Sagan, Pale Blue Dot, and these words. And this was about 6 years ago. And these words, they seem to be so perfect for our times. The chaos of the times that we're living through, this extraordinary moment that we're living through. And it's very challenging. But it was like this perspective on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's the idea of looking at the planet and going, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Why are we doing all this stuff to one another? Why? And it felt, I had this idea in my head. I wanted to make music that was sort of pulled out, but would could pull in as well, like on the detail of life, but also pull in. And it was all about being a human being, almost like, being a human being on this planet. Radiohead fans would say, Ed, what kind of record you're making, like when we're on tour? And I said, I'm making an existential dance record. And it was slightly flippant, but there was some truth in that.
Sure,
because about what it really means to be a human being on this planet right now.
Yeah, that perspective I think is a good one, especially with, again, as you mentioned, with all the chaos that's happening right now, and the chaos that will be happening, or at least we think probably will be happening throughout the course of 2020. Did I read that these songs weren't necessarily always going to be sung by you, or the idea was not always to have you sing them, but then eventually it came around?
Well, when I started it, I've never done sort of lead singing. I've done backing vocals. So it wasn't, again, it was like another, it was one step at a time. So I started writing the songs, and I thought they'd be sung by someone else. And then some stage into the demoing of the songs, I suddenly realized, actually, I can do this. And it's been a process of, again, it's sort of, it's being revealed, and same thing with the live thing, how it is and how the album is. It's almost like it's always there, and you're just kind of, you're trying to figure out what it is.
Yeah. I don't think people appreciate. I think if you were on the outside looking in, it'd be easy to say, hey, the guitar player from Radiohead's making a solo album. That must be really easy, whatever thing to do. And I don't think people appreciate all the different challenges it kind of really takes for you to step out like this creatively, to kind of go out and do this. And it's just a cool thing.
Thank you.
The songs that we've heard, I haven't even heard the whole record yet. I've heard the 3 songs that are out there.
Yeah.
I heard what I heard last night at the show, and it just seems like this thought out, wholly unique creative vision, and it's a cool thing.
Thank you. Well, I mean, the thing is that, as I was saying, there was no, there's no need for me to make a record. I'm in a band that's, being creatively incredibly satisfying and productive and stuff. So for me to make this music, I have to be utterly compelled, and that doesn't mean I have complete certainty, because of course the creative process can be very uncertain, but it's almost, I sort of, bad Star Wars analogy here. Death Star, like the tractor beam pulling you in.
Sure,
and that's what it's been like. It's like I feel like I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
I have to do this. And in a way, if I don't, this is another chapter of my life. So I'm completely out of the comfort zone, but it's very, very much in keeping with where I've come from in Radiohead, which was always moving forward, always not going back. And this is completely like that. So it surprised me if you'd said this 10 years ago, but I've got the bug, and I'm looking beyond. Like, I'm thinking about the second record and the third record. I've got this thing, and I'm not quite sure what it will be, but yeah, I'm in a very, very, it's a funny position. I'm in a very fortunate position because I can also phone up. I could phone up Nathan East and Omar Hakim.
Sure.
And I can work with Flood. And I can at least have that conversation. Doesn't mean they'll necessarily work with me, but there are doors that are ajar. But I feel like those doors will only open unless there's quality that, so you can have the conversations about things. Would you want to work? But you have to, then you have to go, okay, well, this is what I want to, and have you heard this, and what do you think?
Absolutely, and yes, those doors are open for you. But again, what I was trying to get at a little bit is that it takes guts. You know, you don't have, and like we were talking about earlier, you don't have the luxury of going out and playing your first couple of shows anonymously.
No,
you don't have the room to kind of mess up that other people do, and it takes a matter of guts. You could just be hanging out, or you could be waiting for Radiohead to do the next thing, or what you're going to do, and that's not what you chose.
I know Nick Mason from Pink Floyd a bit, and he has a lovely expression. He said, "I could be at home feeding the peacocks."
Exactly.
I mean, you could be. You're right, but what I always try and look is the positive aspect of it, and the fact that I've done these 4 shows and they've sold out. Mm-hmm. If I was someone starting off, I didn't have this, I wouldn't have that.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So it's you got to take the rough with the smooth.
Of course, absolutely. A few festivals have been announced. Bonnaroo's in there, a handful of other things. How much do you plan on touring kind of through 2020? Is this your whole year?
Yeah, this is my whole year.
Okay.
This is it.
So as of recording this right now, not everything has been announced. No. Keep an eye out because more is coming in
there'll
2020.
Be more. Yeah.
Awesome. Earth is the name of the album. It's going to be out here. It's going to be out in April. It is Ed O'Brien. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having the guts to do it. It's a big deal. It feels weird saying that to a guy like you,
no.
but it's definitely a big deal.
It's a big deal for me.